Hello everyone, welcome to the session. In this session, we will be discussing about exception handling part 2. So let's start the session exception handling part 2. At the end of the session, you will be able to learn about exception handling in Java. So as in previous video, we have already had a discussion about what is exception, what are the differences between exception and errors, how exceptions are occurring, and what is the importance of exception handling in Java. So let's start from there. As we already know that it is important to handle exceptions. So here is a list of different approaches that we can use to handle exception in Java, and those ways or those approaches are try, catch, block, then finally block, and then throw and throws keyword. So these are the three ways by which we can control or we can handle the exception that may or that is occurring within a program that a user wants to execute. So firstly, let's start with Java try and catch block. Try, catch, these are the two keywords, and try and catch are dependent on each other. So try and catch will work simultaneously when we will work for handling exceptions. Now, what is the purpose or what is the meaning of try and catch block? So basically, a keyword, this is a keyword that is try. So basically, try is a keyword which is a block of code or statements that might throw an exception. For example, you are writing down a code and you are having a doubt that this is the line or this is the particular statement, then that can create an exception or that can create an error. So what you have to do, you have to write down that particular code within the try block. Okay, so that's why a try block is also known as exception generated block. So exception generated block doesn't mean that it will create the exception. No, if an exception is there in any of the statement, that you have to put that statement within the try block so that it will be able to find out the exception related to that particular block so that the exception can be handled. So okay, so this is what the concept of try block is. Try is a different keyword and catch is a different keyword. Try is a keyword which is used for generating an exception, but generating an exception doesn't mean that it will create the exception. It will identify the exception. As you can observe in the diagram, which is mentioned here, a try block, that is a block of code that can cause exception, will have to be put within the try block. Okay, that is why we are saying that this is a exception generator. Now, next is the Java code that may generate an exception. What you are doing with that code, you are putting that code within a try block. So we should place an exception generated code, that is risky code. That is the code that can create or that can generate an exception is also known as the risky code inside a try block. We should not keep any normal code inside the try block. Okay. So if there are number of lines within a code, and we are able to find out that this is the code or this is the line which can create an error, which can create an exception. So what we have to do, we have to put only that code within the try block. Normal code should not be put in the try block. Suppose there are three lines in a code. First line is a normal line which can create, which will not create, or which will not, in which there are less number of chances of exception that exception can occur. So it has to be put on the top of the try block. Now the next two statements, out of which one statement is there which can create an exception. So what we have to do, we have to put that code or that line within the try block. Okay, and it's not necessary that only the second line or the third line will create the exception. The very first line of the code can also create the exception. So what we have to do, we have to put that line in the try block which can create or which can generate an exception. So if an exception will occur in the statement one, and for example, like three statements are there, and if an exception is occurring in the statement one, and other two normal statements will not be executed. So therefore, the length of the code inside the try block should not be as much as less. Okay, what does it mean? For example, three lines were there, and out of which first line was the line which was responsible for making an exception, for generating an exception, and the two normal blocks will not be executed. Why these two normal blocks will not be executed? Because before these blocks or before these statements, the effect of that first statement will directly impact the execution of the next two statements. So what we have to do, we have to keep that code inside the block which can create or which might create an exception. For example, if we will not put first statement in the try block and we have to we are putting or we have to put two and three statement in the try block, then what will be happening? Try block will be able to generate the exception. That means we can also say that it will be able to find out the exception. But what it will find that there is no exception. So according to in the program, but the result is that first statement is disturbing the normal execution of the program because first statement is that statement which is creating the or which is generating the exception. But try block is not able to identify that exception. Reason being, we have presented first statement before the try block, or we can also say that outside the try block. So what we have to do when we are working with the try and catch block, the code that might create an exception have to be put in the try block so that we can identify the exception. Then there are three possible forms of a try block, and these are try catch, try finally, try catch finally. When we talk about try catch, then try catch block is always followed by one or more catch blocks. Okay. Then when we talk about try finally, a try block followed by finally block. When we talk about try catch finally, that means a try block followed by one or more catch block, which are followed by the finally block. You can see in the diagram mentioned here. So what has been done? Firstly, we are using the try block. In this, we have put it some of the statement like statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3. So exception occurred inside try block. Okay. Now, what will be happening after complete execution of the catch block? Control never goes back to the execution of the remaining code within the try block. For that purpose, what we have to do, we have to use the catch block so that it can catch the exception, it can solve the exception. So, try and catch will work in the scenario. Okay, then if we will be having finally block, then the try block will be followed by the finally block rather than of the catch block. If we will use try catch finally, then it will be followed by the catch block, which will again be followed by the finally block. Now, what is the syntax of try catch block? Firstly, we have to write down the try keyword. Inside that try keyword, we have to write down that code or that statement which might or which may create an error or an exception. And then we have to write down the catch keyword, and then we have to create, okay, as I already told you, when an exception will occur, it will create an object. So the object of exception is E, and inside that catch block, we have to write down the code which will execute the remaining statements, which will execute the remaining flow of the program. So here we have placed the code in the right hand side, the diagram which has been mentioned, that might generate an exception inside the try block, and every try block is followed by a catch block. When an exception occurs, it is caught by the catch block. The catch block cannot be used without the try block. So catch block, what will we do? It will caught that exception. But what exception will be caught by the try block? The exception of only that statement will be caught by the catch block, which statement is inside the try block. Let's discuss all these things with a simple example. For example, I have mentioned one of the line of statement. I am dividing a number by a zero. I am multiplying a number by zero. I am adding a number into in zero. I am subtracting a number in zero. So these are some of the things. So how I am writing 100 plus 0, this is not logically invalid number input. This is a valid input. I am writing down 100 minus 0, this is also the valid input. I am writing down 100 into 0, this is also the valid input. I am writing down 100 divided by 0, this is an invalid input. Now what I will be getting, firstly what I have to do, I have to write down the fourth statement. First was of addition, second was of subtraction and multiplication and division. So I have to write down the fourth statement in the try block. This is the first. That is, which gives an indication that this is the block, this is the statement which can create an error. And all the three remaining statements have to be written after or before the try block. Now what will be happening? Catch will catch the error which is occurring in the statement mentioned in the try block. And what statement we are having in the try block? 100 divided by 0. Okay. So now what we will be doing is this particular catch keyword will catch the error, catch the exception in this particular statement. Okay. If we have not mentioned this statement in the try block, then it will catch will not be able to catch that exception. That is why we are saying that catch will catch the error and try will generate the error. This is the example in which we have mentioned exception handling using try and catch block. Here we have mentioned the main class and within the main method, and then we have write down the try keyword. In this we have mentioned the statement which can create an error, that is int divided by 0 equals to 5 divided by 0. And then we have created the catch block in which we have created the exception object, that is arithmetic exception, which is a user defined. It's not a user defined, but it is an unchecked exception. Remember one thing also, if the exception is checked exception, then there is no need to mention try, catch, final, and finally block, because the checked exceptions will always be checked by the compiler. Try, catch, final, finally keyword are required either in the user-defined exceptions or the exceptions which are unchecked. That means which will not be checked by the compiler. Then what output we will be getting? Arithmetic exception divided by 0. Because we have mentioned the code that can create an exception in the try block. Then we are having Java finally block. So Java finally block is always executed no matter whether there is an exception or not. Okay, so it will always execute it. So the finally block is optional, and for each try block there can be only one finally block. So if we are using try block and we are having the finally block, then the very first thing is that it is an optional block. It is not required necessarily that we have to mention the finally block. For each try block, there can be only one finally block, and also it is always executed. Okay, no matter whether the exception is there or not. So the syntax of finally block is like, firstly we have to write down the code in the try block that can create the error or that can create the exception. Then we have to create the object of the exception in the catch block, and then we have to write down the finally block. So in finally block, we can mention those statements which are not creating any exception. Okay. So if an exception occurs, the finally block is executed after the try catch block. If exception is not there, then there is not exception is there. Okay, so we have the clarity that finally block. But if an exception is occurred, then how finally block will be executed after the try catch block? Okay, otherwise it is executed after the try block. For each try block, there can only be one finally block. So let's understand by the help of the example. Here we have mentioned the main class. In main class, we have mentioned the main method, that is public static void main. In this main method, we have used the try, that is the exception generated code, that is int divided by 0 equals to 5 divided by 0. And then we have the catch block. Okay. Then after catch block, we are having the finally statement. And in this finally statement, we will put that statement which has to be executed, the very first thing, and which will not create any error or any exception. So let's try to observe what will be the output of this. So output will be arithmetic exception divided by 0 plus the output of the statement mentioned in the finally block. That is, this is the finally block. So from this example, we are having a clarity that actually finally block is the block which will be executed in every condition. So what we have to do, we have to mention that code or that statement which will not create or which will not generate any exception. So we are dividing a number by 0 inside the try block. Therefore, this code generates an arithmetic exception, that is arithmetic exception divided by 0. The exception is caught by the catch block and then the finally block is executed. So in this session, we have learned about the exception handling in Java. I hope now you are having the clarity that what is the purpose of using try block, catch block, finally keyword and final keyword, how try and catch are connected to each other, how they are helping the user to handle the error or any of the exception. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you so much.